Uh, Hi everybody, and first of all, Joke, thank you for having us in one of your Brownback sessions. It's always interesting to share our lessons learned with the world. I also see from the attendees that there are also a couple of Sky users, so I think from that perspective, it's going to be a pretty interesting session. Just a quick introduction for the people who do not know me yet. My name is Dean, and I am responsible for customer success at SQAI Suite, which basically means um, that I make sure that our users and our partners, like Brightest alike, have everything they need to succeed with our platform. So in order to start my session, I'm going to share my screen so you can look at what I am looking at. Just a second. I think you can see my screen and in short my slides. All right. Okay. So first of all, yes, again, welcome everyone, and thank you for giving me your lunch break today, because that's what it actually is. So if you're eating right now, have a nice lunch. Um, During your lunch, I want to talk about something that sits quietly underneath every software project we run nowadays, and that's obviously context. And I don't necessarily mean the code itself, but everything the application code basically depends upon. So I'm talking about requirements, business rule, a trace of historical decisions, basically the why behind the application that you're testing or developing. Um, we've built a suite around one idea now. We see AI and AI agents rising. We see a lot of people struggling with building their own AI agents. So we wanted to build a set of smart AI agents that only become genuinely useful when you feed them with the right context at the right moment across the whole software delivery lifecycle or software development lifecycle, the SDLC. Um, so let me start with a problem that we kept running into, and we saw a lot of other people running into, because I suspect you've probably run into them too when you are building or configuring your own AI agents, right? So here's the problem in one line. Context is actually everybody's job, but no one's system. Think about where the knowledge of your product actually lives. Some of it is in requirements documents, some of them are in tools like Jira, some in a ticket. Part of the information lives in test cases, or just a lot of information is in someone's head or a chat thread from, for example, age months ago. Yeah, everybody contributes to it, but nobody actually owns it as a system. So when a new person joins, or you're building an AI agent that you need in your workflow, you're basically stitching the picture together from fragments. So, and if you get it wrong, it will be a slow and expensive failure. Now, there's a discipline emerging that tries to fix exactly this. And it's worth defining it clearly because it's the foundation for everything else. Yeah, when using AI. And the answer to that is context engineering. Yeah, the easiest way to understand the contrast with something you've probably already heard of and do on a day-to-day basis is prompt engineering. Yeah. Well, prompt engineering, you already know, but that is about writing better questions. You carefully tune the words you send to an AI model or an AI agent so that it answers well in the moment. When we're talking about context engineering, that is an entirely different thing. That is about building a better knowledge base around your AI landscape. So instead of crafting a perfect question every time, you have to make sure that the system already holds the right structured and trustworthy information So it can answer almost any answer you throw at it. One is a clever sentence, being the prompt. The other is actually a durable foundation. When you ground an AI in that foundation, you basically unlock a specific technique that most of you will already recognize. So when you look at it, if you have context available for AI to process, you can do that via retrieval augmented generation, for example, or RAG. Yeah, the principle is simple. Instead of letting the model just guess from its basic training data, you can retrieve information from your reality and feed it in so that the answer is grounded in your truth and not the models or the internet, because the model is usually trained on internet data. But there's one part that teams who are building or configuring AI agents actually consistently miss, and that is the fact that RAG only works if two pillars hold. The first pillar is the retrieval part, meaning can the system actually find the right piece of information at the moment it needs it? The second one is the quality of what it finds, meaning is that information actually accurate? Is it complete? Is it current? Is it token optimized? Is it readable for an AI agent? Yeah. If either of those pillars fails, then the whole thing collapses. You will get confident answers built on, let's say, a bad foundation, which is arguably worse than getting no answer at all. So the natural next question is, what does information that's genuinely AI ready actually look like? So if the context is the fuel for an AI agent, then the next slide is about the quality of that fuel. 5 things that turn ordinary documentation into something an AI agent can actually reason over. So let me tackle one by one. First, does your information have specific titles? Naturally, often they do, but a human skims a vague heading and infirms the rest, usually from experience or knowledge that they have at their employer because they have been there for years. If you take into account an AI agent, they can't do that. It retrieves it by relevance, so precise title that names a software module, and what it covers is what it lets it pull the right page or the right information instead of a near miss. Good titles are how the AI agents finds the right context in the first place. So it makes your context really, really searchable. Secondary, is there a summary present in those levels of documentation? For example, 3 to 5 sentences up top. For example, scope, owner, authority, last validated date. This is the agent's fast path, meaning that it can decide in one read whether a document is relevant and whether it is still trustworthy instead of ingesting the whole thing and just fill the rest in by guessing. Yeah. It also tells the agents how much to wait what follows. Coming to the turn port, your requirements should be written as requirement IT blocks, meaning having a clear trigger, expected results, exceptions, acceptance criteria. This is the difference between an agent that writes, for example, plausible code and test cases, and one that writes incorrect ones. Structured requirements give it something testable to anchor to, so it generates and validates against your actual intent rather than its best guess. And the same goes for the business rules. Agents are the strongest on the happy path and weakest on the edge cases, and this is exactly where the defects are hiding, right? So when you make each rule very explicit and separate, everyone becomes an edge case that the agent can generate a test or scope for, instead of a silent assumption that it will probably skip. Yeah. So and then the last one, is a kind of a very specific one, but do include very clearly your additional references and scope. AI agents can follow links and relationships to assemble context, but they'll happily wander into territory that doesn't apply if you link it wrong. So additionally, annotating why pages or items are related to each other and stating plainly what is actually out of scope, this will keep the agent reasoning bounded and stops it from pulling the wrong rules. So put that together and you can turn your documentation into a context source that any AI agents can trust. That is the core of context engineering. Yeah. Um, but that is also the part that most teams get wrong. Plenty of teams have seen this coming and try to build their own AI agents in house. Yeah. But the focus is too much on the agents itself and not on the context system behind them. Yeah. So that is also why most of those agent implementations start to break down or fail at scale. They go in technology first. They focus on one model, the framework, the clever orchestration, and they skip the unglamorous part, which is solving the context challenge and getting their information AI ready. Yeah. If you look at Gartner's agentic AI forecast and something we also see in practice when talking to our customers, everything points the same way. The gap between AI co-pilots, AI agents, and actual AI value is overwhelmingly what I would say a context and readiness gap and not a model and a technology gap. And when you skip that foundation when building your own AI agents or working with AI agents, you will get a very predictable failure mode. And that is also the results where you don't have a real context system behind it. You try to compensate it by cramming as much information as you can into a prompt, meaning everything gets stuffed into these giant mega prompts and enormous skills.md file. If you work with Anthropic Claude, for example, it might feel productive, but actually you're giving the AI agents your knowledge and everything you know, but at a certain point it will backfire because the more you cram in, the more genuinely critical information gets buried and lost in the noise, meaning that the model can not longer tell what matters. So the harder teams push on prompting, the worse the signal to noise gets. So when we go and look at why this is happening, we can think that it's because the whole industry has been looking in the wrong place. So why is this happening? Yeah. Um, we think at Sky because the whole industry has been looking at the wrong place for doing AI agents right, especially in the software delivery lifecycle. Because to be honest, most software work in the SDLC doesn't happen in the IDE or code editor. You have to look at where the effort actually goes, meaning that 80% of the work of delivering software sits outside that code editor. I'm talking about analysis, specification, testing, review, coordination, reporting, and all of that. And yet, if you look at where all the attention has gone, AI agents, AI co-pilots, code generators, IDE assistants, billions of investments, and they're all focused on that 20% that actually was already the most automated part of the life cycle. I mean, remember test automation, Kubernetes, and all that kind of stuff, even before AI, that was already highly automated. So, which means if you look at it from an objective point of view, that the leverage is hiding in plain sight. It's the analyst that has to write and keep track of requirements. It's the product owner grooming and prioritizing a backlog, the QA lead designing a test strategy, the manager in endless meetings tracking quality across releases. That's the 80% of context where nobody is looking into. And that is exactly where we as SQAI Suite are now shifting our platform to very strongly. Yeah. Um, so how does Sky then fit into that world? Well, it doesn't ask you to rip anything out. Yeah, it connects the dots in the context or the limited context you might already have, meaning your documentation and project management, your test management, your application code via your Git repositories, test automation, performance testing, and of course the AI co-pilots you are using today or the agents you have built on top of those technologies. So the point is actually simple. Sky orchestrates the tools you already use and makes them work together, meaning that it can turn scattered, disconnected sources into one connected context fabric to which you can also plug in your own AI co-pilots or AI agents over MCP. But we'll get to that later in a bit. If you look at then how that works, it's an end-to-end AI layer that builds the context fabric right across your existing workflow in actually 5 short steps when we zoom out from a bird's eye perspective. Step 1 is obviously context. Sky generates all the context you're missing, in case you are already missing context, and also optimizes your existing context, pulling it straight from your existing application code or any connected source, like, for example, Jira, Microsoft SharePoint, Azure DevOps, and so on. It really makes your context AI ready because then your own AI agents and Sky's AI agents can use them. When you keep it in Sky, you can also go to step 2, which is the analysis part, meaning it reads and improves the generated context and turns it into structured, complete documentation assets for both the humans and the AI agents in your lifecycle. Yeah. Which then brings us to step 3. If you are already a Sky user, you will know it from that part. That, of course, from that assets, you can then create full coverage structured test cases at every test level, push them to your test management suite, automate them, and then keep tabs on what is going on in your software delivery lifecycle. Yeah, centralizing everything and making sure that insights surface that you really need, so you can make intelligent decisions, and giving you full traceability end to end about the quality work you're doing in your software delivery lifecycle. So that's the engine. But rather than just describing it, I want to show it to you live what it actually means, and I will do that in a demo. Yeah. For that, I will exit my slides. There we go. And if everything looks right now, I think you should see the Sky application. So once you're in Sky, you can connect it, or it's best to connect the AI agents that work underneath Sky to your existing context that you already have. If you do, that context will probably live in one of the applications you see here. For example, tickets in Azure Boards, written out information in Azure DevOps Wiki, or on Confluence, you'll have your application code somewhere in Git, and maybe some other assets and tools you can connect Sky live to. Those connections are not that hard to do. Those are all API connections. You just give in your API key, you scope the project that you want Sky to consume, and once it is connected, you can basically use that source openly in Sky. And that is all great if you have those sources. Sometimes you have parts of information that still doesn't live in any of those integrations. For example, locally on your laptop, or maybe in a shared drive somewhere. You can just also go ahead and upload those files in Sky. So our AI agents can be trained on it, and the context fabric can be formed. But what if you don't have any of those? And what if your context is, for example, maybe not that complete? Yeah. That is why we released a new set of features that enables you to build your own context fabric for both the humans and the AI in the cycle with just a few easy clicks. For example, say that you are migrating an older application to a new one, and you need to determine what has to be built. Yeah, often and more than not, for legacy applications, the amount of documentation or the why behind it is quite limited. Now, in 𝗧𝗏, it doesn't have to be. Yeah? I can create new documentation for that, for example, and then select one of the connected sources I have in 𝗧𝗏 as a base. If you don't have any existing documentation, that doesn't have to be a real problem because you can just directly connect your Git source code or the source code of your legacy application to 𝗧𝗏 and have it reverse engineer your complete application and document it on quite an amount of levels. So you can see I've added the repository with the source code to 𝗧𝗏. I could also add some additional Jira items to it because I have a Jira connection here. I could add some additional documentation from Confluence in case I want, or I can even attach previously uploaded files that I have in 𝗧𝗏. Yeah. But I'm just going to keep it in the repository. We see it as a selected source down here. And then I can go ahead and determine what type of documentation I need to continue. For example, functional application, which is more front-end focused, giving you an inventory of the features, the workflows, and basically how people will use the application. You can also select the API dimensions, which obviously gives you an overview of all API endpoints inside the application or that it is connected to, complete with authorization information, so how it authenticates. If you just need code information, it's a very old code base, for example, and it's documented poorly. You can also generate the code documentation and also get an overview of what the application architecture actually looks like visually. And of course, the first intent that 𝗧𝗏 was built for when it started out 2 years ago is the whole testing part, where this is not focused on test cases specifically, but focused on, for example, writing a complete test strategy for your existing code base, identifying if there are already existing tests, showing you the gaps, and so on. If I then would have any additional instructions for the documentation that I would like, I could just enter them here. But in my case, I'm just going to keep it empty. Yeah. Once I start that tasks, I'm basically giving 𝗧𝗏 the stage to build a context fabric around the assets that I had in my organization, even in the case that they were imperfect. So I see that this job is now running, meaning that 𝗧𝗏 is going to extensively write documentation for me from A to Z. Yeah, even if my documentation that I priorly had wasn't perfect, 𝗧𝗏 will make it perfect for both the human and the AI. Yeah, perfect is maybe not the right word, by the way. Let's make it more as suitable. Yeah. Um, Let me show you, because this documentation generation will take a while. Let me open some documentation that I generated before. Let me see. Documentation here was to SharePoint. This one was written to Confluence. Oh yeah, by the way, you can choose to where you want the documentation to be written. So if you have connected Confluence, for example, you can write it back to Confluence. If you want it in documents in your SharePoint, you can do that as well. Let me show you both so you have an idea of what you're getting. So when 𝗧𝗏 writes documentation to Confluence, it will do that in a structured way. This is all 𝗧𝗏 written. So you can see the levels here. Um, in this case, I wanted API documentation, I wanted architecture documentation, code, functional, and testing. So let us maybe open the functional documentation. Then you immediately see it has created quite a lot of pages underneath that. In this case, also one being focused on business rules. Yeah. And that is really cool because it makes, of course, a table of context, lining out all the business rules it could find in my code base and the information I gave it. And then it will go ahead and describe everything in the utmost detail that is needed to reverse engineer it completely. And as you can see by my slider on the right, it's quite an extensive document by itself. So a lot of context to go for, even diagrams in ASCII art, so that it's completely retrievable by AI if you would use this information further down the line in Sky or with your own AI agents for that matter. So it puts the context right. And it does the same for edge cases and limitations, a whole lot of documentation. It also does the same on testing, making a test suite inventory for which test case you already have, the gaps you have, and so on. So it really gives you very much in detail documentation that you otherwise would not have because it would have been hard to maintain and to perfect it for AI. So this documentation is both ready for the human and also ready for the AI. Now, if I would have used SharePoint as place of output, it would just push it to my folders in SharePoint. It follows the same structure, yeah. But the cool thing is, let me take architecture maybe for example. The cool thing is that it puts it directly in those folders, and if you're using Microsoft Teams, which is actually SharePoint underneath, you can just retrieve that information also there. So it really helps your team work together in a more appropriate way. And all files are already formatted as Markdown, meaning that it's human readable in the Markdown editors that are standard in Teams. It also gets visualizations, by the way, which comes in very, very handy if you need the information visualized. As you see here, it has flow diagrams underneath it. But the Markdown file by itself has the actual code of the diagram in there, meaning that this diagram is 100% traceable and retrievable by the Sky AI agent or any AI agent that needs it, because in essence, it are markdown files, a lot like the 𝗀𝗲𝘀𝗀𝗶 files and so on. Yeah? So it really makes it very, very tangible to give your AI agents the right context. And even for yourself, let's take an example. We have some information in our Confluence. For example, a requirement we had on our payments application. Yeah, I can go ahead and take that information and I want to maybe visualize it for myself, which is also a feature that we released in closed beta to some of our users. If you are a Sky user and you're in this call, you can always email me directly and ask to have these features in closed beta as well, so I can activate them. But say that you have an incredible amount of text, like you have here, some plain text. It has a high level flow chart, but it's actually an image, so not really responsive, yeah, or it's more static information. But say if you're having a hard time reading this and finding out what it is about, you can always have Sky make that visual for you. You can generate a diagram from it, and that's also you can do something from the guided task, so you do not have to prompt it specifically. So let's go ahead with that. It's not a Jira ticket. It comes out of my Confluence documentation tool. I just paste the URL of the page that I want. I add it. I can see it's added to the knowledge fabric of Sky. And then I can select what type of visualization I want. For example, um, let's take a UML use case diagram as example. I can determine the output format based on the tool that I have when it comes to drawing diagrams or visualizing things. So today we support Mermaid, Planturel, or Dot, which are the three most common extensions for that. Yeah. And I can also provide it with some additional context. For example, meeting notes I had. about that feature from 2 weeks ago, I can just paste them here. Yeah. Then I can just start the task and it will go ahead and retrieve that information from Confluence and visualize it for me. While it's doing that, I do not have to stay here. I can just go to any other spot in Sky and complete my work. All diagrams are saved centrally, and you can review them here. So the cool part is, of course, they are dynamic. First of all, so you can look at them, zoom in, zoom out, and you can really see in detail the context that you're working with, visualized in an interesting way. You can make it, you can use it as assets to make information clearer to your colleagues, but also to your AI agents, because these visualizations have code underneath to visualize it, and this code is AI ready. So you can use it with any AI agent, preferably the Sky AI agents, of course, to have it handled. And that is also why Sky is really good at building the knowledge fabrics, knowing that every source that was used to generate a visualization, if it's a Confluence page, a SharePoint document, or something you uploaded, is tightly coupled. For example, if I click through on this source, then I know that this has been used to build the actual diagram. So I can go ahead, take the diagram, and also read the connected sources. You as a human can do that, but any AI agent can do the same thing because it has the track and trace of where it comes, it has the relationships, and it can use it to then actually do the deeper work. Um, Coming to the deeper work, what is the deeper work then? Well, for example, I could use this diagram now and say, okay, I actually need to test that set of features, so please draft me the test cases. And then I will get in the Sky chat mode, which is basically a good way for me to interact with the AI agents behind Sky. Yeah. So you'll see that it will propose the test cases to me based on the visualizations. Yeah. And then it will go ahead and create them as well in my test management tool. Yeah, this can maybe take a small while. So let me see when it finishes. There we go. Could be that the network is a bit on the slow side here. There we go. We have the test cases. Yeah. And you immediately see that the consultant sources is the diagram, first of all. And when I want to review the test cases, I can just open a pop-up and I can then see that the test cases are written out in detail, taking into account all the levels of context it has. Of course, I can still make adaptations or remove steps before I go ahead and actually inject them then in my test management tool. Um, Once those test cases are injected in your test management tool, they're also now lightly stored in Sky in the test management section, where your whole team can get an overview of the generated test cases. So if you look at it from A to Z, you have your documentation, which Sky can write via the guided tasks. Based on that documentation, you can make the visualizations and even update like Confluence analysis, Jira items, make sure that all the context is filled out correctly. You can do that with Sky, AI ready for both the human and the AI agents. And then Sky goes ahead and generates your test cases from that information. Yeah, these are also then centrally stored, but they are stored in your test management tool. So if you have Azure DevOps Test Plans or Zephyr, TestRail, any other test management solution with a good API, that is where they're actually stored. To give you an example, when I click on this test, I end up directly in my connected test management tool to Sky, which is in my case Zephyr Scale, where you have the test case published as draft with a label that is AI generated. You can see there is all the information filled out, including the detailed scripts. And it's also fair to note that from this point, if you do an adaptation here, that it is also synced back to 𝗀𝗏 so that it always works on the latest version of the test. Now, this part is something that will be upgraded significantly in the future, because we will be releasing our own test management model, so that our customers can steer away from the pay-per-seat test management tool they have today, and it will be built more AI first, so that it can proactively take into account contextual changes that are connected to 𝗀𝗏 and actually suggests and builds you the test cases proactively rather than you still having to steer it through the chat. So stay tuned for that. And from that point on, I can go ahead and automate the test cases in my test automation repository with just a click of the button. Actually, I can. It works for any technology. It's technology agnostic, Playwright, Selenium, TypeScript, anything. I can just take that and generate the automation code. It will push it back into my repository as a pull request, so I can then go ahead and review it. Yeah. The cool part is 𝗀𝗏 actually tackles everything from context creation, context fabric, and the full 80% that is not writing the actual application code, but you can give your developers access to 𝗀𝗏 as well over MCP. Yeah. And MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and it's basically a protocol that enables all AI-powered tools to communicate with each other, meaning that with a simple configuration file like this one, I can add 𝗀𝗏 directly to my local development environment and do everything I just did in 𝗀𝗏 with a Copilot, third-party Copilot that I'm using. So I can say, for example, retrieve Jira issue 235, for example, and make my top 3 tests in my test management tool, and then automate them here or something like that. Yeah, I can also use it to pull in the documentation from 𝗀𝗏, to pull in the diagrams, everything that lives in 𝗀𝗏 and in the connected apps of 𝗀𝗏. The MCP is a bridge for that. Yeah? So I can pull that in, and then I can have it do its job, and it will basically be my own AI agent, which is running in Copilot here, that talks to the AI agents of 𝗀𝗏, and they work together to finish the work end to end, which is a real powerful combination, because 𝗀𝗏 will have created your high quality context fabric and can do high quality retrieval at a low token cost. And other co-pilots that you use in your IDE can then retrieve that information with a highly correct score, meaning a lot of signal that is getting back, and you can then continue your work on that into your own agentic AI flows wherever you need to. So you can then later on execute the tests that you have created using 𝗀𝗏. Yeah. So yeah, that is that part from the practical point of view in a nutshell. So to go full circle, let me summarize that for you. What changes when all that context consolidates into a platform like ours? There are basically three things. Yeah, first is the speed of delivery. We see teams burn 30 to 50% of their effort nowadays on AI rework. We go after the upstream causes of that rework by setting the context right, so not the symptoms, so that releases can move faster with confidence. Secondly, it's the cost of quality that is going down, because roughly 1 in 3 production defects are actually born before a developer writes a single line of code. It's in the analysis part, it's in the product owner grooming the backlog, it's in missing information or gaps that are being left unidentified. SQAI will catch those upstream when generating the context fabric where they are still cheap to fix. And third, yeah, it's AI visibility. Tokens are becoming increasingly important to manage AI cost. Yeah, so SQAI can give you a live token optimized AI ready context. So SQAI's outputs is twice as likely to meet your goals. You will see real signals and you can act before risk actually will land in productions. Now, numbers are just one thing, but this also changes the day to day for people doing the work because it's not about replacing people. Actually, it's about shifting them up the value chain. For example, a business analyst now writes specs in long form documents, spends hours clarifying those ambiguity in meetings. With SQAI, they can define intent in a structured form, and SQAI will flag ambiguity, missing acceptance criteria, and edge cases as they write. I will show you an example before we end this presentation. Yeah. You'll have the product owner grooming the backlog by field, negotiating the scope with no clear quality risk. With SQAI, they can prioritize on live signals, coverage, risk, dependencies, and so on, so that the trade-offs become very explicit. And then going all the way to the QA engineer, who today authors and maintains test cases and reacts to defects after they are filed. But with SQAI, they curate a full quality strategy, validate AI generated coverage, and own the most critical parts of exploratory testing. And then lastly, there are the engineering leaders. Today, they chase statuses across tools, meetings, and report on velocity mostly and budget. But with SQAI, they steer from a single cockpit on up to date context and live quality signals. In every case, the boring work shrinks, the context gets set right, and the judgment work will grow a little bit. Uh, so yeah, um, I'm gonna give you an example really, really quick to show you. I have a conversation that I had this morning with SQAI, where you also immediately see that it flags the ambiguity. So I asked it to create tests for a certain feature set, and it has created the test, but the nuance is important. It has identified that there are gaps missing in the current coverage, and it has also identified that some of these gaps should be actually raised with the product owner before test cases can be further written for it. This is something that might have took humans weeks or months to find out that these gaps were there, and SQAI does that in a few minutes because it has set the context fabric straight. That is real value right there. And it's on that value we try to focus. So just to close off the session, why SQAI then? Okay, start with governance. You see we have enterprise grade control. The context fabric acts as a single source of truth amongst your distributed tools and information where both humans and AI agents can draw from. Every action and output is traceable back to that information. You get the built-in traceability and central management of integrations, access, and privacy and security by design. Yeah. Um, Next to that, we are convinced that SQAI is a lot of value for money. When the right context is already assembled in the fabric, agents will stop burning tokens rediscovering it. So that's how you get more output per token with the freedom to route each task to the best fit agent and model rather than being locked to one provider. And with AI native test management, including in the near future, and we're not user capped. So there's unlimited users in a SQAI account. Uh, Next to that, and the last one, of course, you gain speed. The context fabric is what removes copy paste between your tools because the context already flows between them. So our out of the box integration, guided task quizzes for consistent outcomes, and MCP connections to connect it to any other AI agent or copilot you like. All of it works because our context fabric carries it across the seams instead of you managing it by hand. So with that, I would like to close the conversation and close the session. If any of this reason to you, I genuinely love to talk, so feel free to reach out to me or to Joke. Thank you all for your time today. And for now, I'm also happy to take any questions in the time we have left.
Okay, yes, thank you, Dean. So time for questions right now. One question only. I'm going to read it out loud. What about storing test cases in Azure DevOps? Can SQAI link test cases to a requirement-based test suite according to the user story the test case is originating from?
Yes, you can do that by asking or setting SQAI to prefix it to the test case titles, and then it will be linked. It does not make hard connections in Azure DevOps. You still have to do that yourself. That's why we will write the test cases as draft. It's also because there are some API limitations with those third-party test management tools, but that's something we'll solve with our own test management module.
My video has gone, but I hope you can still hear me. That's the most important thing. Thank you all for joining. Thank you. Bye-bye.